Welcome. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks for having me.
How's it been? This is your second time to Hong Kong. How has it been treating you?
Let's see. I've had Peking duck twice. I had some nice noodles yesterday. I'm here for the food.
Yeah, I saw.
We're at 4 Michelin stars. We're trying to get to 6 Michelin stars by the time I leave. So.
And when do you leave?
Sunday.
I saw your Instagram story, and I saw a lot of tea and dumplings and duck. So I figured it's probably first 3 trips to Hong Kong.
I'm here for the duck, and and to meet angel investors and founders, but mostly the duck. God, it's so good.
Yeah, glad you discovered it. So. Let's dive right in. What have you been impressed by? What are you sort of thinking about Hong Kong in terms of the tech ecosystem here?
Yeah, one of the things I've been doing is, since I wrote my book Angel, about angel investing, they've been translating it into a couple of different languages. So they translated into Japanese in September and Chinese this month, and they're going to do a couple of other languages. I think the Germans and the French. Spanish, we'll get to it. We'll get those versions shortly. And I've been traveling the world talking to people about becoming angel investors. It turns out that a large number of rich people are very bored, and they're very rich, and their money is sitting in zombie devices like bonds and treasuries and cash and equities. And these things do not move the world forward. And what I'm hoping to do is inspire people through my story and my experience by teaching them all the mistakes I made as an angel investor and all the things that made me very successful as an angel investor, and then inspire maybe 10,000 of them to join forces with me in sharing deals and investing in companies together. So we have a website called thesyndicate.com, and you can, if you're an accredited investor, you can go there and see the investments I'm making. And we've done 88 investments so far with this program in the United States, and we'll be expanding it to other countries. And we have some international investors already. And what's very interesting is that we can now have 250 investors, accredited investors, which is a definition in the United States. We can have those investors put in, say, $2,000 each, which for a rich person is like nothing. Like they bought a business class ticket for $8,000. Like 2,000, that's 4 investments, right? You put those all together, and we can invest $500,000 in a founder whose company has 2 or 3 employees and see if they can change the world. And so the first syndicate we did was a company called Calm.com, CALM.com. And nobody would invest in this meditation app 4 or 5 years ago. But I thought the founder was brilliant, and we gave him $378,000, $50,000 from me, and $328,000 from 65 other investors. And that company announced last year a $250 million round, and the company has since, I think, quadrupled their revenue, and they've been a little bit public about it. So that investment is now up, I think, 100 or 200x. In other words, the $378,000 we put in probably has a value of $35 to $70 million. That was our first one we ever did. And obviously that's a very small amount compared to the Uber investment I did. But that company would not have existed, or maybe they would have existed, but it would have taken them an extra 2 years had we not been risk-taking enough to put that first investment in. But we wouldn't have, one person wouldn't have put in $378,000, I don't believe. But 66 people putting in on average $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 each, well, that's pretty easy. So I want to be able to take more risk and invest in more companies. And I think in Japan and in Hong Kong and Australia, I've already seen there's a syndicate like ours or an angel list here launching Angel Hub. There's one called Angel Port in Japan that's going to launch. And then there's some equity crowdfunding down in Australia. So, everybody talks about venture capitalists, but venture capitalists come after seed investors. So in order to have a vibrant community, you need to have seed investors. You need to have people who are willing to write the first check. It's easy to write the check after the company has $1 million in revenue or $10 million in revenue. It's very hard to write the check when they have $10,000 a month in revenue.
Do you see that model being the future in terms of not just with you, but other angel investors sort of branching out into getting more people on board into one fund?
Yeah, so I did a class today with my friend Mike Savino, who's in the back row. We taught a class called Angel.University. It's the 5th time we taught it. And it's a curriculum about how to invest. And it's for these accredited investors, also known as rich people, to kind of show them, like, don't be scared, but here's how to not make mistakes. And I think there were 50 or 60 people in the room. And I told them all, you should all start a little mailing list, or I guess it would be a WeChat room, or a WeChat room, and share your deal flow with each other. And instead of one of you putting $100,000 in, why don't you have 25 of you put $4,000 in, and all 25 of you could try to help the startup win with introductions or advice or employees and team members, and so that's what I think the future of investing will be. And if you saw, did you notice this crypto thing that happened last year, the 2 years?
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin? You guys had that over here too?
Oh yeah.
I'm joking. It was crazy, right? There were 2,000 ICOs. Of those 2,000 ICOs, 1,990 something will go to zero in my prediction. They were all a giant scam. Anybody here in the crypto space? Raise your hand if you're a crypto person. The person raised his hand, great. If we were here like last year, half the room would raise their hand. The other half who didn't raise their hand are the people who were in crypto, who lost their money, and are too ashamed they're in crypto right now. But what that ICO movement did, and this is ICO, and I believe that crypto is an interesting technology, don't get me wrong, or it's an interesting collection. But ICOs, as fraudulent as they were, and they were run by the most incompetent grifters, either outright criminals, grifters, or incompetent people, but in large part, probably 95% of them. But what it showed was there was a global appetite for people to send money, even to a founder who had no success in their life, who had written no code, built no product, but wrote an 8-page white paper with spelling errors in it. And they shipped these crypto dipshits $100 million, $5 million, without ever meeting them. And they lost all their money. And nothing will come out of that, except, I think, there may be 1 or 2 projects that actually survive it and do interesting stuff. But what it showed me was there might be 10 million people in the world who would like to invest in companies and take risk. Well, there's 10 million people who want to do it, and they each put in $10. We're going to have $100 million to invest in startups. Or if they each put in $100, it's $1 billion. So I'm just trying to get to 10,000 members in our syndicate. We have 2,900. If I get to 10,000, I can invest $1 million in a company almost anytime I think they're worthy of it, that they've hit the benchmarks, that they're good stewards of the capital. And that's what I'm hoping comes out of the crypto space, is some regulation and maybe a group of countries saying, hey, you know what, like the European Union or the Asian Pacific partnerships, maybe we could make a partnership where we say, these 10 countries agree that startup investing, where people invest under $5,000 each, the regulation is very simple and standardized. And if that happened, it would be very powerful. Anybody can play poker or blackjack in almost any casino in the world. I mean, Koreans are not allowed to gamble in their country. And I'm not sure, are the Chinese mainlanders allowed to go to Macau? They can get a visa, but it's a little bit hard. It's hard. But people in America and Europe can gamble anytime they want, anywhere they want. But not on startups. So you can go to Las Vegas and lose all your money. You could lose your house in Las Vegas. But if you were an Uber driver, you wouldn't be able to invest in Uber as a private company. And I think that that's the missed opportunity. Can you imagine if every Lyft, Uber, and Didi driver were able to invest 10% of their driver earnings into equity? They would all go from being poor or lower middle class to being middle class, and maybe some of them would get rich. Well, that's what I want to see happen in the world. I want to see more economic mobility. And I want to see people fall in love with capitalism again. And right now, capitalism in America, people don't believe in it. I know in China they do. And that's interesting in and of itself. Like, I can't believe I'm sitting here in Hong Kong saying in 2018 that Chinese people believe in capitalism more than Americans. I mean, what's going to be next? Chinese are going to believe in democracy more than Americans?
It's 2019.
Oh, it is 2019, right. I don't even know what year it is. It's a jet lag.
The question you get asked all the time, what do you look for when you invest?
I like founders who don't give up and who are passionate about what they're building. I like ones who have an axe to grind. I kind of like the difficult ones, like to argue and debate. I like that. I'm not looking for perfection in a founder. I try not to think about, do I think the idea is going to work or not? Because I've made so many mistakes trying to figure out if an idea is going to work that I've lost more money on my own inability to predict the future than I have, placing the bets. Like Airbnb. Anybody here ever hear of Airbnb? Yeah. Anybody stay in an Airbnb? Raise your hand if you've stayed in an Airbnb. Amazing. It's basically the entire room except for the gray hairs. How many people have hosted an Airbnb? Raise your hand if you're a host. Okay, fantastic. There's like 10. When I heard that idea, they said, oh, you can go stay in an Airbnb. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, you can stay on somebody's couch. And I said, why would you do that? Not a hotel. Like, oh, it's $30 a night or $50 a night. I said, oh, wow, that is pretty cheap. But you want me to stay on a serial killer's couch? And they're like, oh, no, it's not serial killer. So I was like, well, how would you know? And they said, well, there's a rating system. I said, you understand that, like, serial killers are sociopaths. Like, they are incredibly charismatic. That's how they get people to come to their houses before they kill them and eat them. Like, the rating system for Jeffrey Dahmer or, like, Hannibal Lecter would be 5 stars. Hannibal Lecter was charming. And then they're like, oh, no, but you could also host people. I was like a serial killer. I could host a serial killer in my own home. No, thank you. But everybody here raised their hand. So it's not up to the investor to figure out if the idea is going to work. I think that's a big mistake. It's one of the top 2 mistakes. And that's probably the biggest one, is your own ego will get in the way. You will think that you can predict the future because you've had success. I've had a lot of success as an angel investor. And all it's proven to me is how stupid I am. Like, oh my God, I can't figure out what's going to work. So I stopped trying. Why should I try to figure out what's going to work? If this founder thinks it's a good idea and they want to spend 10 years on it and they built a kick-ass product and they want to give it a shot, okay, fine, let's go. As long as you're good at building a product and you're not going to give up. And the second big mistake, I think, people make is trying to figure out how big the market is. Everybody wants to figure out, like, what's the total addressable market? And then they get some, like, statistic from Deutsche Bank or, whatever, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and they're like, well, Goldman Sachs says that, the total number of cars on the road and taxis is $17 billion. And what all those statistics leave out is the creation of new markets. Do you know what the market for smartphones was in 1990? Take a guess.
0?
Correct. Do you know what the market for televisions were in 1850?
0?
Correct. These are great markets. Smartphones have made a lot of money. Televisions have done fantastic. Some people here have them. Like, they're incredible. So if you're trying to predict the market, if it's a truly innovative product, you're not going to be able to. I'd say the third biggest mistake investors make is consensus. They think that a bunch of people sitting around and making a decision is better than a single person making a decision. It is not true. Consensus is death. You have to have the internal fortitude to look somebody in the eye. This guy who sat in this first row and go, that guy sat in the first row, he's a winner, I'm going to meet him afterwards, take a selfie. Like, that's the guy I'm going to bet on, whatever, And so many of these venture partnerships, they all want to sit around a table and debate it. And you know what? It's very easy to be negative in life. It's very easy to say, here are the 100 reasons why this will fail. You know what? Fuck you. Like, anybody can sit there and tell you the 100 reasons why someone could fail. How about saying, here's 2 reasons of why this might work. And instead of focusing on why it's going to fail, focus on what could go right, right? Everybody's focused on what could go wrong. I'm focused on what could go right. That's my job, is to be wildly optimistic and say to the founder, everybody thinks this isn't going to work. They might be right, but I still think it's worth trying. We should try. Because if we do figure it out, it will change the world. And, you know, human nature is so conservative. Everybody is scared. It's our DNA. And the reason we're scared is because we used to get eaten by lions and sharks and all this stuff. Like, we were not the top of the food chain. And so our DNA tells us to be scared and not take risks. That was then. This is now. There is no risk in starting a company. If you fail, you learn something, and then you start another one. Like, people are acting like if you start a company and you fail, you're going to die. You're not going to die. In the West, the leading causes of death now are obesity and suicide and people taking opioids and ODing. Like, that's what people are dying of now. Life expectancy in America has plateaued. Not because people can't live forever, because they're opting out by eating themselves to death. Like I'm doing here in Hong Kong. But I'm going to stop eating when I get back to America. But they're literally taking drugs and eating and committing suicide. That's how people are choosing to leave the human race. Like, it's weird today. And I'm trying to convince young people to take risk and start companies. And I see it in the Chinese entrepreneurs and the hard work ethic and the motivation. And in America, you know, the people I invest in, I see it. But overall, I see a lot of people who want to be socialists and they want a handout and they don't want to work hard. And I tell them, you know, in China, they're working 9-9-6. And they go, what's that? 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And that's what I worked my whole career when I was coming up. And they're like, yeah, no, I want to go to Coachella. I'm like, okay, go to Coachella. They're like, well, I want to go to both weekends. I'm like, okay, go to both weekends. They're like, I want to go to both weekends, and I want to stay for the week in between, and I want to go the week. Coachella's a music festival in America. And they just want to go to Coachella for 2 fucking weeks. And I'm like, you got a company, you're in competition. Like, they're not fierce anymore. Like, we have a weak generation in America. Now, there's still some hardcore people, but when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, everybody wanted to win. Everybody wanted to be rich, powerful, start a big company, be famous. And now they just want to be famous. They just want to be on Instagram and be famous, but they don't want to work.
Do you have a WeChat account?
Are you going to add me? You're going to scan my...
No, I'm just curious.
No, I don't have WeChat.
Okay, you don't. No, well, it's...
I have Line and, yeah, WhatsApp and everything else, but...
Yeah, no, I'm leading into the next question because, you know, obviously there's more than 1 billion users on WeChat. Traditionally, you haven't seen U.S. tech companies get into China, and you know, the other way around too, right? Chinese tech companies haven't been able to get out of China. Obviously, we're seeing that change with the likes of Huawei, Xiaomi, to an extent Alibaba. Does that whole thing impress you? And do you think, you know, even if you look at the top 10 unicorns a couple years ago, mostly US, now I think over at least half, if not more, China. So what do you make of the China tech scene, not just obviously being successful in China because of the population, but also being able to infiltrate Europe, Africa, America, potentially?
Yeah, I don't see them making big inroads in Europe or America anytime soon. Africa, you know, Asia, of course, are going to dominate. You know, we have this little trade war going on, which is really stupid. Like, we need to work together. And it's a very challenging thing for Americans because we believe in freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and a very fair market. And in China, you know, it's a big transition right now, obviously, and we want to be respectful of that. I think most Americans, I mean, except for the president, but Americans want to be very respectful of that change. And so we're watching the change, and it's going to take a mutual understanding and respect that I feel has stalled because of President Trump. he hasn't built bridges, and I think we need to build some bridges. And then I think, some other countries, whether it's Saudi Arabia or China, we have to have an open discussion about human rights. I know it's a very touchy subject, but it's very important to the people in the West. And I think what we saw in Saudi Arabia with the journalists being murdered, it's very troubling. And we were so close to having a very functional relationship where Masayoshi Son from Japan had $100 billion, largely from Saudi Arabia, that he was investing in India, America, and China. This, to me, was a beautiful example of the world coming together to do commerce and to do something beautiful in terms of entrepreneurship. And it just shows you like one little human rights thing. And we're not perfect in America. We have problems with our justice system. We still have the death penalty. We still have a lot of challenges that we need to work on. But I would really like to see the world try to work on those two problems, human rights and the environment. And sadly, and I think it's a fault of the Brexit and Trump phenomenon in America, we've become very xenophobic. And young people from China used to want to come to Harvard and MIT and start companies in America, and they don't feel the need. This is a big mistake, a critical mistake on the part of America. So we're not perfect either. Overall, I'm optimistic though, because I believe that one entrepreneur, or two or three as co-founders, can change the world. And that to me is why I go to work every day and invest in companies.
Back to your investment strategy, what are the industries in 2019 that really excite you? That when someone comes in and says, I'm doing something in this space, you really perk up?
Yeah, I have three, I think, that are particularly interesting. I like the ones that are hard, like really hard. And I think education is one where the American university system is very broken. It's too expensive. And people are graduating with $200,000 in debt and getting a $40,000 a year job. So education to me is super interesting. I think it's very hard. Construction and housing is super, super hard. And I think you have a lot of incumbent folks there. And I still, because I'm a former journalist, as you probably know, I'm still in love with media and the news business. And it's collapsed in America, and it's very hard to make money from it. And it's a very important role, the freedom of the press. That's how we got Nixon out of office, because the press, just two journalists and, Woodward and Bernstein really worked hard on that story, and they led that charge in a way like entrepreneurs. And so for me, those are interesting, but remember I said before, I try not to understand too much if I understand if this is going to work or not. I want the founder to tell me it's going to work. I want the founder to show me how it's going to work and why it's important. But I'm very interested in housing. So we have a company called Blockable, BLOKABLE.com. They're making houses in a factory, modular houses, and they ship them and then stack them together like Legos. And in America, we have a housing crisis. It's too expensive. We had a bunch of wildfires. We lost large numbers of houses. And houses are not affordable. And so I'd like to see them to be able to build houses in a factory like Tesla does cars with robots and ship them out. I'd also like to see, education get fixed, and maybe lower cost education. Instead of education being $200,000 to get a $40,000 a year job, I'd like to find education where you pay $40,000 and get a $200,000 a year job. It makes more sense to me. And so I've been studying those companies. And we have one called Brilliant.org. And all they do, it's a subscription. You just go online and you put in, you just basically take math tests and you solve math problems. And what's very interesting, it's a global phenomenon, and they're finding all the brilliant people around the world. One of our core premises and our core thesis as investors in my company is we never underestimate anybody. And what Brilliant.org does is they don't underestimate anybody. They think they're going to find the most brilliant mathematician in Sri Lanka. They'll find the most brilliant physicist in India, or somewhere in northern China. They'll find somebody who can solve math equations that are waiting to be solved. And to me, and they're doing it for a very small amount of money. And so I'd like to see those things change in our lifetime. Yeah.
Well, in just a minute, we'll open it up to a couple audience questions, but I want to get back to something you mentioned earlier about what you look for in investments. You said somebody who pushes back, who challenges you. How do you sort of decipher the difference between somebody who is going to push back and sort of really be a free thinker, but also someone who's stubborn, right? Because that's sort of a notion, especially with millennials and people coming out of college, that they might know it all or that they're stubborn. Does that ever piss you off, and how do you sort of know the difference?
You know, if you look somebody in the eyes and you listen to them deeply, you start to figure out who they are. It's something I learned from gambling and playing poker, in trying to read people. So I think all these different investors have different gifts or skills if they get successful. Some of them are very good at studying technology. Some are very good at studying markets. I'm very good at studying people. I was a psychology major. And when I talk to people and they tell me their idea, I look in their eyes and I can see like into their souls if they really believe what they're saying. It's a very weird experience for me, because sometimes, like, I just see them and they just like, there's a big neon sign over their head that says winner, winner, winner. And I'm like, oh, this person's a winner. And the person next to me is like, what are you talking about? I'm like, do you not see the big neon sign above their head that's blinking orange? Winner, 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 and give this person money. And they're like, no, I don't see that sign. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the only person who sees it. It's like this weird superpower. But I think it comes from years and years of watching people, even people I've invested in, delude themselves into thinking they're passionate about an idea and then not doing it. I also like people who have skills. So one thing I've realized, and I get a lot of millennials and a lot of Gen Z people ask me, like, what's your advice? Hey, you're so successful. I'm like, well, get lucky and invest in Uber. Like, literally, if I didn't invest in Uber, I probably wouldn't be on the stage right now. Let's be honest, I got lucky. But, you know, there were other investments, too, that I got lucky on. I think it's the ability to learn new skills is the most important skill. So let me say that one more time. The most important skill is the ability to learn new skills, and I'll make it even more precise. The ability to independently learn a new skill and be motivated to learn that new skill. Right now, when I was coming up as an entrepreneur in the 90s, you didn't know what a term sheet was. And if we were founders and you had a term sheet, I'd say, can I see your term sheet? You'd be like, I can't show it to you. And then I go to a lawyer, can I see a term sheet? The lawyer would be like, do you have a term sheet? I'm like, no, I don't have a term sheet. Can I see one? They're like, well, when you get one, we'll go through it with you. And I was like, okay. And now you go on the internet, you're like, term sheet, and there's like 50 VCs who have explained it. And then there's 100 videos on YouTube. And then there's a book that you can buy, and an ebook, and there's a conference. Every single thing you want to learn how to do is online. And so I moved into a new house, and there's a tennis court. I don't know how to play tennis. I grew up in Brooklyn. Like, there's 4 tennis courts in Brooklyn. I don't know how to play tennis. So I went on YouTube with my daughter, and I was like, how to hit a tennis ball. And I watched the video with her, and then I was like, how to hit a backhand. And we taught ourselves how to play tennis. And then I wanted to learn how to play guitar so I could play like Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits, which will probably never happen, or it almost certainly will never happen, but I get a lot of pleasure thinking that I might someday be able to play a Dire Straits song. And there's an app called Musician that's $90, $60 a year. And now I'm playing and I'm like almost able to play a song. And so I've been trying to just myself see if I can do that. And I think that in a very short period of time, anybody who's motivated, who stops playing video games and stops playing with their social media, can get to 70% proficiency in anything. I'm not saying being a master, but you can get to 70% proficiency, but most people are not motivated enough. But that kind of resourcefulness, man, I'm finding so many founders who I'm like, oh, this logo's terrible. They're like, oh, should I redo it? I'm like, you should totally get somebody to redo your logo. And they come back, and 4 days later, they're like, hey, which logo do you think is better? I'm like, oh, wow, these two are really good. I like A for these reasons. I like B for these reasons, but I would go with A. I'm like, oh, by the way, who did the logos? Like, I did it. I'm like, how did you do it? And the founder's like, well, there's this video, and then there's this course on Skillshare, and then I found this article about what makes a good logo. And they just teach themselves. All the information's on the internet. Now, people in China or emerging countries who are hungry are finding this information, teaching themselves, and excelling and changing the world. And then we have a bunch of entitled people in America, there's some portion of these next 2 generations who are like, well, I don't want to learn how to do that. I just want to be famous. And I'm like, well, why don't you learn some skill and be famous for something? And they're like, well, Kim Kardashian's famous for being on the internet. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Like, she's making $100 million a year, but like, learn how to do something other than Instagram is my message today. If you're great at Instagram, you could be a developer or a designer. Okay.
Let's get one. We have time for one question.
All right, there's about 8 questions. We'll just take 7 of them. I'm sorry, we only have time for 7 questions.
Hi, Jason.
Hey.
You're so cool. So, I'm a developer from Russia.
Back at you. I think you're cool.
Okay. Yeah, I see you. So, I have a pretty simple question. So, how can we agree on the meeting? So, I think you can invest me.
Okay. All right. What are you building?
I'm building an educational product.
Okay.
For learning languages.
For learning languages. How is it different than Duolingo, the leading language learning app?
What is the difference?
Yeah. How is it 10 times better?
Yeah, okay. I know this from Peter Thiel. Okay, so it's better in 10 times because you can learn languages with speaking with your phone and improve your speaking languages. So Duolingo do not have speaking improvements.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. How many customers do you have so far? Is it built?
Yeah, it is built, and I have about 2,000 customers, but I'm just...
Are any of them paying yet?
Not all.
Great. So some are paying?
Yes.
How much do they pay?
They pay about $3 on subscription.
Per month? Per year?
Per month, yeah.
In what country?
In Russia right now.
Perfect. Email jason@calacanis.com, a link to the product, and a chart with your weekly revenue since you started charging. That's how I would make the decision. I would look at the product. I've already looked at you deeply. And I asked you very short questions, and you gave me very good answers. And I'm thinking you're bold and creative, and you're making some money. So I think that you have gotten through about half of my filters. What I would need to know now is, can you and I scale this to 100 million in revenue? And is the product truly better than Duolingo's? And we won't be able to do that at this moment right now, but we will be able to do it over email. Where are you based?
I'm based in Russia right now, but I can move everywhere in this world.
You can technically move everywhere in this world now. It is possible. So I think we kind of had a great moment, you and I, and this could be the start of something big.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's pretty good. It was good, right? I feel like we had a moment. Okay. Very good. All right. Very good. They're going to kick us off stage. We're not going to take any more questions? Okay. We'll take one more. Go ahead. I don't have to be anywhere. If there's another speaker, I apologize. Is there another speaker? Oh, there's no speaker?
No, it's just you.
Hi, Jason.
Oh, fuck it. We'll go to the end. I'll answer every question. Go.
So I was going to ask a quick question. For investors in the early stage, right, you get bombarded all the time with tons of deal flow, especially when you're a successful investor. And the magic thing is usually...
I think you meant the most successful angel investor.
Yes, I missed that.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
And so, usually, how do you determine what meetings to take?
That is a great question. In the early days, I was just happy to meet anybody because it was 2008, 2009, and the financial crisis was underway, and nobody wanted to build anything. Now, it's a peak market, and everybody wants to be a founder, so you're right, I get like hundreds of emails a day. If somebody knows one of my founders that I've invested in, or an investor that I've invested alongside, and they send an introduction, I will take that introduction 10 times more seriously, because it's been vetted. However, I got an email 3 years ago, and it was a link to a YouTube video. And it said, "Hi, Jason. I watch your podcast. It's brilliant." It's always good to start with that, by the way. Book, podcasts, I saw you speak. Something like brilliant. inspirational, something like that, but short. And then there was a link. He said, I know that you don't like long emails, so here's a link to what I'm building. I clicked it, and it was a robotic arm making coffee. And I wrote back, is that a joke? And he said, no, it's my startup. It's called Cafe X. I'm in Hong Kong. And I said, okay. And I went on the internet and I typed in Starbucks costs, and I figured out how much rent Starbucks pays and how much revenue they have and how much rent and then how many employees they have. And I started doing like a basic amount of research for like an hour. And then I wrote him back. I said, you should come to my incubator. And he said, how do I apply? And I wrote back, you were just accepted. And I said, come to America. And I sent him $25,000. And since that time, the company's raised $14 million. It has 3 locations in America. And it's literally going to kill Starbucks. And it's also going to get rid of millions of jobs where people froth milk for 8 hours a day and want to kill themselves. Anybody here a barista? I mean, or anybody ever been a barista? It's soul crushing, right? Do you want to go back to that job? You do? You don't. How about you? You want to stand on your feet for 10 hours and make coffee and then have people give it back to you and say you made it wrong? Meanwhile, it's just milk, sugar, and coffee. I mean, how could it be wrong? It can't be wrong. It's milk, sugar, and coffee. Drink it. Be happy. So anyway, that's how I did that one. And my point about that one was, it was a short email that had a link to the product. If you have ideas, congratulations. 100% of people who are awake have great ideas. Everybody here has had $1 million idea. Everybody here has had $1 billion idea in their life. The problem is they've also had 1 trillion other ideas, and figuring out which one they want to actually pursue, and actually pursuing it is the difference. And about 50% of people who are asleep have ideas. Those are known as dreams. They don't mean anything. You get 0 credit for ideas. Everybody had the idea that robots could make coffee. It's an obvious idea that robots will do everything for us. It's been in science fiction forever, right? What matters is who's going to go buy a robotic arm and coffee machines and actually build it. Well, this kid did. So if you want to separate yourself, make a world-class prototype or product, or, like our friend from Russia, get some people, even 2,000, to use your product, and maybe get some of them to pay, and then send the chart. So when I see a chart in my email or a world-class product, I think, oh, that person has separated themselves. And people with skill. I had somebody tell me that they wanted me to invest so that they could find a co-founder. I said, by the way, if you can't find a co-founder, you failed the first test that most founders will face, which is to convince somebody to go on a journey that is destined to fail and spend 2 or 3 years of their life working 10 hours a day in ultimate frustration and failure. If you can't get somebody to do that, you should not be a founder. If you can't find a co-founder, you've disqualified yourself. So if you want to qualify yourself, be able to build a product, be able to build a team. Do it on the weekend. Do it at night. Make something small you're passionate about, and that's what investors will respond to. If it's something where we feel like it's inevitable. When I saw that coffee machine, I said, he's going to do this. I just had this sense like, and if not him, somebody will do it. But I know Starbucks won't do it because they can't. They have an innovator's dilemma, right? Like they have this whole experience, but they might buy this company, or we might buy them. Like that's totally conceivable. So I think that a chart or a product is the best way to get people's attention. Okay, next question. Who's got the microphone? Raise your hand, please. Or just start talking.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions.
Why not?
Just because. I think we just had an amazing day, and I think if we were here for so long,
everybody grown.
70% of these people are going to get deals and get emails to say, come email me.
Everybody grown collectively.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, grown.
Oh, is it because the AV's done?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what the AV. All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I think everyone else here is.